So, yes, hello and welcome to Cinema Galactica, part of the Geek Show podcast network. We are the Geek Show's dedicated films podcast. I'm Graham, and this week I've been joined by...
Tim. Hello.
Tim, indeed. We'll also have Sarah on a bit later to talk about Criterion's release of Dorothy Arzner's Dance Girl Dance, and I will be reviewing Jennifer West's film title Poem. But before that, we have the small matter of our director's lottery. It came out with George A. Franju when we last selected it.
Yes.
And that means our film of the week is his final film, 1974's Nuits, Rouges, also known as Shadow Man.
Or is it also known as the Man Without a Face?
I don't know if it is.
No, maybe not.
I would assume it can't be, because Mel Gibson would then have encountered trouble when he used that for his film.
Okay. Yeah.
But the central character in it is called the Man Without a Face.
Yeah. No, this is from 1974, and is a kind of, I don't know how exactly to classify it, a kind of crime conspiracy thriller sort of thing.
It's in that weird kind of genre that flourished in pulp fiction around the turn of the 19th to 20th centuries. Kind of stuff like Fantomas or Arsène Lupin. These things where incredibly ingenious burglars and criminals are the heroes of the stories. Kind of like a proto-supervillain movie, although you'd have to say a lot different to something like Joker.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say that thinking about the old sort of master criminal literature that you got in France, probably this guy, the Shadow Man, or the Man Without a Face, is more of a bastard than the average.
Yes, he really is. This is one of two films that Franju made in collaboration with Jacques Champrot, who was the grandson of Louis Feuillard, the legendary French silent movie director who made the original silent serial versions of things like Fantomas and Les Vampires, which this very obviously pays tribute to. In this, Champrot also plays the Man Without a Face, so it's quite an odd piece of genetic casting, I guess.
Yes. Franju is more famous for The Eyes Without a Face.
Yes, yeah.
Isn't that his famous one?
Yeah, it is, yeah. And that's a horrible film.
From about 1960.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, although that's got a good reputation as some extreme kind of horrible plastic surgery sort of stuff, a few of those little kind of fetishes of his have carried over to Shadow Man, at least kind of superficially.
Yeah.
It involves a lot of kind of like rooftop antics of cat burglars jumping around, but it also manages to involve kind of quite sort of horrible, I don't know if you call it facelifting exactly, but a kind of horrible lobotomization of people.
Yeah, there is... Shadow Man, one of Shadow Man's lackeys is a scientist who fancies creating an entire race of zombies, much like Steve Coogan's Californian scientist in The Day Today, I felt.
Yeah. I mean, the tone of Shadow Man varies a bit all over the place in this respect, which is there's some kind of light-hearted, silly kind of spy-fi stuff with funny gadgets, or I wasn't really sure how funny I was supposed to find it exactly. But then there are some little bits of extreme horror kind of just creeping in at the edges. Yeah. And the storyline involves essentially Shadow Man, or the Man Without a Face, having already set up his extensive criminal organisation, seemingly in multiple countries. With extensive underground layers with banks of computer screens.
And let's not forget, secretaries dressed as ninjas.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yes. So the standard costume, if you're a member of the Shadow Man's gang, is to wear like a completely black bodysuit with a faceless white mask on the front of it, right? Yeah. And even if you are on the admin side, you have to wear this. So even if you're sitting at a typewriter, just whatever they do, filling in reports or just tuning in the TV screens, you have to be in those costumes. Yeah, and
Yes, yeah.
the man without the face himself wears a red mask, and he's the only one wearing a red mask. And whatever costume they're in, his will be red. So when they're riding on motorcycles in black motorcycle leathers with black helmets, his helmet is red,
Yes.
just to make sure he can always be recognised, I suppose, by his
He
allies and
might,
his enemies. Yeah,
yeah, he might forget which one he is without that.
yeah. Well, he does have quite a pretty well sort of dissociated identity because he constantly also gets into disguises.
When you first meet him, he is dressed as an elderly woman running an antiques shop because he wants to find the lost treasures of the Templars and he thinks maybe someone might bring it in for valuation. What is left unstated, which I kept thinking of, was how long has he been in this disguise? When did he buy this antiques shop?
Yeah, but we're kind of left. I mean, we're left with this. The plot line is more or less that the Knights Templars are still a kind of secret underground organisation meeting in crypts and
Yeah.
worshipping their sinister idols. And obviously, had an absolutely staggering hoard of, gold and jewels or something brought from history that were in a shipwreck somewhere. And this is
Yeah.
regarded by serious historians and archaeologists as a complete myth. But the Shadow Man and his gang are nevertheless desperate to get hold of it to the point where it's just an obsession, really.
Yeah.
And he goes around impersonating people to various ends in this way. He impersonates the brother of one of the people he murders in order to try and find the secret. He impersonates that elderly woman. He impersonates like a British civil servant or something in a pub.
Oh man, the British civil servant is literally Guy Incognito from that Simpsons episode.
Yes.
Huge moustache, bowler hat, everything. Incredible.
Yeah, it's really. I have to admit, thinking I didn't get fooled by the disguises. They were sometimes being, the director was being quite, trying to be quite subtle and avoid very, very close-ups, from the front where you would see. But nevertheless, it was almost always obvious immediately. So I don't know if that just is intentional or what. But you see the old woman, and it's sort of like, in the first shot, the old woman, oh, they've got some old woman overacting. Oh, is it definitely an old woman? And then you realise, no, it's like a large, well-built 35-year-old man. Yeah. But now the question of what actually happens in it is more or less that after it starts out with very little in the way of origin story for Shadow Man, and he pretty much goes on a kind of murder spree and theft spree in order to try and find clues to where the Templars' treasure is buried and get the bits that are needed for it. And then the relatives, and the cops and the relatives of his victims and their friends kind of team up to try and thwart him by sort of staging various ruses of their own, like setting traps for him and that kind of thing. Shadow Man has a very sort of a beautiful cat burglar kind of accomplice.
Yeah, who is one of the most Fouliardian touches in it. I mean, that whole rooftop chase she had could have come straight out of one of those bits of Les Vampires with Musidora Irma Vep, who is essentially the patient zero of the sexy cat burglar strain.
And there weren't many actors in it other than that I recognised, to tell you the truth, apart from Goethe Fröber, who is the actor probably best known to have played Goldfinger in the movie Goldfinger.
Yes, he is assigned to solve this case of the missing treasure, presumably because the French gendarmes know that he loves gold, only gold.
Oh, good. yeah, good point. Hadn't thought of that one. But that rooftop chase, I thought was one of the more effective bits of the movie. I've got to say that the bombshell I'm going to drop is that overall, I didn't actually think the movie was that effective, really, for the most part. I mean, what was your impression overall like that? How sort of thrilled were you?
Yeah, I'd seen this once before, and I remember really enjoying it and thinking, why is this not a better known film? And then I watched it again. Part of me watched it again and thought, oh, that's why it isn't a better known film. But it depends on what wavelength you approach it on. I mean, I think there is there is a level of knowingness to it. There is a scene where some of the heroes are trapped in a room that is filling up with gas, and the only person who is available to rescue them is this elderly farmer who just shuffles very slowly over to the window and goes, "Ah," as he looks in before, like, gradually breaking it. So there's all sorts of
Yeah.
things in it that are genuinely funny, and it is basically a compilation of mad adventure serial ideas. I mean, it's not Eyes Without a Face, I think it's fair to say that,
Yeah.
but it is very entertaining, I think.
The one I liked was the cat burglar with her blowpipe with darts. Were they darts that kill
Yes,
people or they just knock people out? I think they
I
just knock people
think
out,
they
don't they,
knock
probably?
people out. I think it hits Paul de Borrego at one point, and he sort of comes back from it. No, it doesn't hit him.
But
It hits the poet detective, one of my favourite side characters in this.
yeah, but it's that the cat burglar fires her blowpipe and it's an absolutely crack shot at hitting the target kind of on the forehead directly above the left eye. So inevitably, as soon as she
Yes.
does it, they suddenly have the little feathery dart sticking out of their forehead and immediately collapse to the floor unconscious. But the only trouble is, although it has a lot of those kind of fun scenes, it's
Yeah.
strangely kind of slow to get started, and it seemed like it spent more time than it actually needed to explaining what was going on to us. And I felt like the police in it, given that it's one of those movies, the police have to end up pretty well incompetent, really. You know, they more or less completely muck up everything, don't they? In that, I mean,
Oh, they're terrible. Yeah.
the victim's friends and family say we're going to try and set a trap for this guy, and the police say, "Oh well, that's a brilliant idea. The police station's just down the road from there, so come and get us if you need anything." It's like what? And then every time they dash into a room and suddenly have the Shadow Man at gunpoint or whatever, he immediately just easily tricks his way out of it by throwing a gas bomb or locking them in behind a door or something like
Yeah.
that. He gets on a motorbike and is just gone. And it's just kind of a continuous series of incompetent stuff, which made me wonder why they were getting such kind of focus and so much time spent on them, really. But I don't know, maybe it's just that what people would expect, or what the audience expected it to be approached more as a kind of crime thriller. But it doesn't have much of an origin story for the Shadow Man at all.
No.
And he remains quite an inaccessible character. You see, almost all the time you see him, he's masked up or in disguise. And I
Yeah.
kind of went in thinking, well, is there going to be a twist ending where he suddenly takes off his kind of final mask or the last layer and you reveal actually it was some other character in the movie
Yeah.
disguised as a fake person in disguise? But, I mean, I don't know if it's too much of a spoiler to say that actually doesn't happen, really. And I also thought we might get the slightly more Eyes Without a Face kind of approach where you would reveal underneath his last mask, the red mask, he was just like horribly disfigured or had no face or something like that. It was just but again, no,
Yeah.
it doesn't
Kind of
quite happen
gothic
either. In
ending.
fact, yeah, but it doesn't quite get to that either. In fact, the movie, in a way, it does kind of lack an ending in that sense. It leaves quite a few things kind of unresolved. Like, they don't actually really locate, and nobody is the person who comes out on top holding the Knights Templar treasure. And likewise, no, they don't actually catch the Shadow Man, and he sort of escapes. And it kind of felt like, what's the idea here? To present it as being kind of middle episode of a serial. So it's supposed to look like you knew who this guy was at the start, and then at the end he's always going to escape and be back for another adventure. So this is just kind of one episode,
Yeah.
which is an all right conceit, although I still felt like for some reason there was something very slightly kind of plodding in the direction of it. And sometimes it worked really, really well, like the rooftop scene where it sort of followed the cat burglar woman's feet as she walked kind of across the floor and through the burgled kind of apartment. And it had an unusually kind of relaxed score, which actually worked dead well.
Yeah.
But then some of the time they just spent a long time on chases where they weren't really building up the suspense. And I don't know.
It's interesting, yeah, you mentioned suspense because I think one of the things that this illustrates is that when you're talking about thrillers, you can talk about thrillers in terms of having a suspense-driven narrative, which is like Alfred Hitchcock's old idea of letting the audience know there's a bomb under the table when the characters aren't aware of it. And suspense is
Yeah.
based around, saying something will happen. And then you have the adventure model, which is just based on things happening, and they don't even have to be particularly set up. So long as they're happening, it's interesting. And
Yeah.
I think the suspense model is obviously more satisfying in a lot of ways from a kind of narrative and filmmaking viewpoint. But I think
Yeah.
when you're trying to pay homage to this kind of era of pulp fiction, you have to just accept it as a kind of conveyor belt of stuff happening. And the thing you mentioned with the unknowability of Shadow Man himself, I think, is absolutely a feature, not a bug. A character like Fantomas or like Maldivor has to be a complete puzzle to everyone, explicable by no earthly system. I mean, famously, the Surrealists were obsessed with Fantomas. Rene Magritte used to paint like huge replicas of the posters for his films because he is just purely malevolent and lawless, and his actions have no logical explanation. And there's something kind of satisfying on an almost Freudian level about that. You're seeing someone be an absolute monster.
The the other characteristic, the sort of gimmick he had, was that he tends to kind of emerge out of doors or into trapdoors quite a lot. He seems to be able to open a hatch in just about anything, really.
They're
basically,
I think there's about 3 doors in this that aren't secret doors. Everything else is hidden in a bookcase.
Yeah, hidden in a bookcase. He opens doors and trapdoors into the sewers. He opens trapdoors that hold on the floor. He opens train windows from the outside.
Yeah,
it's just a lot of that kind of stuff. I don't know whether you can read any symbolism into it, but I thought it was quite a good kind of gimmick that he can vanish that way.
Yeah,
just sort of in and out of stuff. I mean, likewise, there was that sequence on the train where he climbs on board the train while it's moving, and climbs along. No, he climbs out of. He books his own room on the train in disguise, doesn't he? He climbs up out of the window on the train, onto the roof, along the carriage while the train's moving.
Yeah.
Which was a pretty impressive bit of sort of stunt work. It looked to me like they really did that.
Yeah, it did. And it's fascinating because that's about 2/3 of the way through. You've sort of been thinking all the way through, okay, this film isn't, big budget by any stretch of the imagination, so we'll just accept that. And then suddenly, towards the end, there's this pretty incredible stunt. Yeah, congratulations to them for that.
Yeah, although again, to kind of perhaps illustrate, it was spectacularly irrelevant to the plot, really, because all he was doing was just moving from one train compartment to the next. So it's like, well, he probably could just have gone out of the door along the corridor inside and back into the next room he wanted to be in. It seems like that would have been easier.
Yeah.
And maybe he would have been spotted in some way, but it seemed like there would still have been an easy way of getting away with it on the inside. But what was he stealing? Can you remember what he was stealing? He was stealing the fake seal things.
Yes, the decoys.
Yeah.
Yes, which someone had took on the pretense that they could find the treasures of the Templars by dowsing for them, and by that point in the movie, you just think, yeah, why not?
But I thought the point was he set up in order to sound ludicrous, but basically it did end up kind of being true, didn't it? Which is that they discovered that the Templars' gold was actually made by alchemy, and so had a unique radioactive signature, which you could detect with a big radio antenna on top of your car. So someone was driving around looking for it that way. Yeah.
That's how to do
Makes
it,
sense
kids.
to me. Yeah. Again, it's kind of describing all these stuff and all these moments. These were the really great moments, but sometimes I felt like subplots and secondary characters like the police were given far too much screen time, given they really contributed nothing at all to the plot. And it would have been a more interesting movie if it had been the secondary characters who were just the kind of civilians who were forced to deal with this and nobody believed them. But I don't know.
Yeah, I'll go for that. I think that this kind of supervillain genre always has a problem with the forces of law and order. I mean, they need to be there, if only because there needs to be a threat to the main character, but they are rarely, if ever, the bits that people remember from it.
Yeah, and we had this thinking about this with Hammer movies, if you remember, that it's stuff like you can't really arrest the vampire or mummy particularly. I mean, you can have the police in the film, but that can't ever really be the outcome, so inevitably they've got to be dropped before the end. But,
Yeah, I think there's a level of truth to that, yeah.
So, I don't know, Graham, what more have you got to say about it than that, except that it is it's full of kind of crazy spy-fi gadget stuff, even edging towards the kind of 60s Batman end in some cases.
Yeah.
It has a lot of weird masked creatures. Like, it has moments where the moment where they're driving along with the cab, and the cab driver won't do what they say, and they seem to be locked in. So he twists the cab driver's head round, and the cab driver is like a wax dummy, like a human corpse that's had a plastic face put over it. Which you get. I was trying to work out where's the origin for that, because that's after it was done on Doctor Who. It's before it was done in Total Recall.
Yeah, I think there is an episode of The Avengers that does it as well. The big mystery, of course, is when he hailed this cab, did he not see that the driver was a dummy?
Yeah, you would have thought in some way. Well,
yeah.
But
it's not. It's not a film that you can analyse like that.
I mean, to some extent, it gets away with not making sense. On the other hand, it does lead to some rather kind of jarring sort of jump cuts and transitions where sometimes you get shown like the character's whole journey practically, and you get to see every step of the way before they get to the next important bit of plot or a crime scene or whatever.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it just jumps over a load of stuff, like in the cab, where they realise they're locked in a cab with a robotized corpse driving it. And then it pretty much just jumps immediately to them being strapped down in the enemy's mad laboratory, don't they, with the mad scientists?
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
And it's just like, well, they must have been driven somewhere, gotten out, tied up, put on the things. And it's like, well, there was probably a good 20 minutes of horrifying adventure to be had there, but instead it just kind of skipped straight to the next bit. And I thought it might actually have been a more enjoyable movie if it had done more of that. But then it's not what you call an excessively long film either, is it? I mean, it's what, isn't...
No.
It's 100 minutes, something like that?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Bit over an hour 30, yeah.
I did have a great deal of fun watching it, even though it is sometimes tricky to tell what level Franju was doing this on. One fascinating thing about Franju from his life is that he was going to make a film with the Moroccan revolutionary Mehdi Ben Barka, who was fighting to liberate Morocco from French colonisation at the time. And his producer realised that this film was not going anywhere, and so tipped the French secret police off to Barker's location. So that was what ended up getting him captured. So George A. Franju's real life was a bit like this kind of mad spy-fi film.
Oh, God, that's absolutely shocking, that, really.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. This was his last one.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? This is his last movie.
Yeah.
In what was a sort of career going on from when? Throughout, like, the 50s, 60s?
Yeah, he'd worked...
Into the 70s.
He'd done some early shorts as early as 1949. His first short, Blood of the Beasts, came out, but he really got into the swing of it with 1958's Head Against the Wall, which is one of his rare kind of almost realist films, and then 2 years after that, Eyes Without a Face put him on the map.
Yeah. But it's, it's... Shadow Man, it's good fun in a lot of places. I'm left kind of thinking, it's a shame it isn't really brilliant, to be honest. It's funny that it seems, given it's the end of his career, that it seems slightly kind of clumsy. And you think, after all he'd been through before, he would have got to the stage where doing like a kind of postmodern adventure serial parody like this would have come really naturally to him. But instead of that, I don't know, it seemed like a few bits of it had been, lengthened or shortened too much. I don't know. Yeah. But... nevertheless, I mean, obviously all we can tell our listeners is if they like the sound of that, they should definitely have a look at it, and they like this kind of 60s, 70s, slightly surrealist kind of stuff.
Yeah, certainly check it out. I still do think it's a very undervalued film. What would you watch it alongside, though?
Well, there is one thing that was constantly cropping up in my mind. I would watch it alongside the 1942 Maltese Falcon. Right. Which is also a film about eccentric thieves trying to acquire Templar golden treasure.
Yeah, I guess that's essentially the same story, basically.
Except it has almost very, very little else in common with it, because the Maltese Falcon takes place in basically two hotel rooms, an office and a hotel room, and they go back and forth between them a couple of times, but that's about it. Yes. Whereas Shadow Man is the same storyline, but done sort of high speed on motorcycles and running across rooftops and that kind of thing, chucking gas bombs at people.
Yeah, I can go for that.
For no reason other than that, that's my recommendation. Have you got one?
I mean, Danger Diabolique by Mario Bava kept cropping up, which me and Rob reviewed on the show earlier this year. The other thing I was thinking was another much later tribute to Feuillard, which would be Olivier Assayas's international breakthrough Irma Vep, which starts off being about a frustrated filmmaker who's been hired to do what he thinks is the very, very stupid assignment of remaking Feuillard's Les Vampires with Maggie Chung, the great Hong Kong action star, as herself and as Irma Vep. And by the end of it, it's somehow taken this sort of fairly simple film about filmmaking comedy template and turned it into something that is very nearly as psychedelic as Shadow Man.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah, that's not what I know. That sounds pretty good to me. Yeah.
yes, Director's Lottery.
Yeah, because we got to pick one for next week.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Or is it for the week after?
It's whenever we do it. At the moment, there is almost
Yeah.
no point planning out what we're doing because all of the release dates for everything change all of the time. But
Yeah, okay.
I can assure you that when we next do Director's Lottery, we will be doing number 226, which is William Wellman, a Golden Age Hollywood director who I'm not that familiar with. Remember, he did Wings, the very first Best Picture winner. He did The Oxbow Incident. He did The Public Enemy. Also, some interesting things there. Yeah, we'll have to have a think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know his stuff at all, really, apart from kind of his general fame in the.
Wings was both the first film to win Best Picture at the Oscars and Paul McCartney's first project after the Beatles.
It's an impossible mission to talk about video games without upsetting someone, so join us at the Geek Show as we lean right into that. On Impossible Mission, we take 2 YouTube episodes and mush them into one seamless whole, on which we talk about happenings from the world of video games or something we just find cool. Formerly known as Press X, and born in you as Impossible Mission, join us as part of the Geek Show podcast network or wherever you get your podcasts from.
So, if you're enjoying what you're listening to, firstly, let me congratulate you on your excellent taste. But secondly, have you considered giving us a little hand to continue making these podcasts in the future? The simplest thing you can do is just to give us a review wherever you find your podcasts, whether that's Podbean or iTunes or anywhere like that. We'll gratefully accept it and read it out on the show. Or, if you want to go a bit further, you can donate to our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Geek Show. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook at TGS_The Geek Show. Don't forget to subscribe to those to be kept informed of what we're doing in the future. Thank you. You're looking good. I like what you've done with your hair.
Well, I may be hungry, but there's always time for The Geek Show.
So I have something that's on Mubi at the moment. It's been on Mubi for a couple of weeks and it's on for just over a week more. And it's called Film Title Poem. It's by Jennifer West, who is a video artist by trade. It's the sort of thing where I saw it and I thought, I really liked that. I can't wait to get on Letterboxd and find out how everyone else really hates it. It just seems to be one of those things with the very arty end of Mubi that my taste is at right angles to everyone else. The ones that I like are the ones everyone else hates, and the ones where it's just someone filming a wall of their house for 40 minutes are the ones that people say, oh, it's just contemplative, beautiful, slow cinema poetry. Jennifer West does not do that. I've seen some other Jennifer West films. There were some of her short films were exhibited in Mima a year or so ago. And they are deeply psychedelic. She makes them by physically damaging the emulsion of 35mm film and projecting them at a speed where that damage becomes actively psychedelic. It is not recommended to anyone with photosensitive epilepsy. but if you can manage it, I find them pretty remarkable. I like this kind of flicker film scene. I'm a big fan of Peter Chikarsky, the video artist who basically brought it back to prominence. And I like, there's a woman called Jodie Mack who does some short flicker animations. And I'd really enjoyed a lot of Jodie Mack's films. And earlier this year, there was a sort of not quite feature-length film of hers on Mubi. Like film title poem, The Grand Bazaar by Jodie Mack was about an hour and 10 minutes long. And I admired it, but I found it absolutely exhausting. Like there are things that I can cope with just over an hour of, and Jodie Mack's strobe speed animation is definitely not one of them. So I was kind of excited about film title poem because I've enjoyed Jennifer West's work, but also kind of worried that this would be another grand bizarre thing where it just leaves my brain absolutely burned out. And it isn't that. And what I think the first thing you have to note about it is that she has slowed down her style radically. There are long stretches of film title poem where you can actually see what the image is, which, to start, what it is a collection of purportedly about 500. I did not count. I can readily believe that it's about 500. About 500 title cards, some of which are on YouTube, some of which are on film posters, most of which seem to have been captured from the film itself and printed off and pasted on a wall. And it has this kind of feeling of a cinephilic scrapbook. There is something so open-hearted, almost adolescent about it. It is like a teenager opening up their cuttings book of all of their favourite movies and showing you what they love. And the first thing to notice is, if this is a collection of the movies Jennifer West loves, it is admirably non-snobbish. It contains films like Max Ernst's Return to Reason, a 1920s silent short by one of the original surrealists that was hugely influential on the development of avant-garde cinema. It also contains Jackass 3D.
All right, yeah.
So I think
definitely broad tastes.
Definitely, yes. And I think that's part of what makes it more than just a sort of abstruse experiment. What makes it more accessible is it does have this sort of open-hearted love of everything to do with cinema. And it made me think of the way that when Quentin Tarantino started out, and there are several Tarantino films in film title poem, but when he started out, American independent film was ghettoised as something a bit arty and a bit snobby, and part of the way that he opened it up was just that he has this absolutely infectious love of movies, and it would be wonderful to think that what Jennifer West is doing the same thing for video art, of looking at this field, which a lot of people think, that won't be for me, that's going to be really dry and intellectual, and saying, oh no, it can just be about someone using a small torch to illuminate the title card of the film Garfield. I hoped it would be that, but then of course I went on Letterboxd and found it had proved massively divisive, and some people couldn't understand why it was made, which, okay, that's what I was expecting in the first place. But I will say, if you are looking for layers of meaning in it beyond just, here are some films that Jennifer West enjoys, there are different levels to it. Most obviously, it does have some of her signature animation. She is animated this time by scratching shapes onto the emulsion of the film, which was a technique pioneered by the 1950s avant-garde animator Len Lai in his film Free Radicals, which, sure enough, you see the title card of here. But that technique, while it does link back to an older generation of avant-garde cinema, is also used for some really dumb jokes, like the title card to Star Wars has two animated lightsabers fighting over it. The title card to Cat People has like cat scratches drawn into it. It is a very silly and playful film, but there is also a level of ingenuity to the structure of it and the way that she almost constructs this into an argument. Because while most of the title cards are arranged in alphabetical order, every now and then she goes off on a tangent and includes some ones from later or earlier in the alphabet. And you can see a level of meaning in there that helps you unlock the way that West looks at movies and at movies she loves, and which is therefore a key to the rest of the project. For example, Conceiving Aida, a film by Lynn Hershman-Leeson, who you would assume West loves because Hershman-Leeson was also a video artist who went into cinema. That's excerpted. There's that title card in there. Conceiving Aida is a film about Countess Ada Lovelace, one of the first computer programmers in the world. Then that cuts from that title card to a title card for The Matrix. So it sets up this kind of link between technology as a way of liberating women with technology as a way of liberating trans women. And that's a really interesting link because, of course, one of these films is an abstruse art house film made by a video artist, and one of them is one of those rare films which probably literally everyone in the world knows. And does that make a difference to how the themes are explored? You see clips from Born in Flames by Lizzie Borden linked to later examples of cinema about black women or by black women, like Ava DuVernay's Selma. You know, there is this network of meaning throughout time, throughout different genres, throughout blockbusters and underground films that she is constructing here. And then she also does really dumb stuff, like uses her torch to illuminate part of a title, then cut to another partial title, creating a hybrid film, such as mashing up Gaspar Noé's Enter the Void with Yellow Submarine to make Enter the Yellow Submarine, a title that I think has the potential to improve both of those films dramatically. So it is this beautiful mix of extremely intelligent, cine-literate deconstruction of mainstream and avant-garde cinema and dumb jokes where someone points a torch at a printed out poster of Ghoulies 2, which I don't know about you, but that is my dream mix of, as another of the films in West's collection would say, the fine line between stupid and clever. That's film title Poem by Jennifer West, which is on Mubi for just a week more. I don't know if it's going into Mubi's library after that. They have started this thing where you can get some films that have passed through Mubi as part of a standing library, and that tends towards the kind of films that you wouldn't find anywhere else, of which this is definitely one. But to be sure, and to catch it while you can, it's on Mubi for just over a week now, and that's film title Poem by Jennifer West.
Yeah, well, that sounds fascinating to me, really.
It's well worth a try, even if you don't like it.
Yeah.
It's about an hour and 5 minutes, so, you know, what can go wrong?
Well, you say that. I mean, speaking as someone who suffers occasionally from epileptic seizures.
Oh, yeah, there is that, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, but nevertheless.
So yeah, that's my review, but that's not the only review we've got this week. Earlier, I caught up with Sarah, who has had Criterion's new release of Dorothy Arzner's Golden Age Hollywood classic Dance Girl Dance to consider.
Yes, I've got Dance Girl Dance, which is a 1940 film, black and white, currently out on Criterion Collection. It's directed by Dorothy Arzner, and it's released by Archeo at the time. And it's the story of a woman well, two women really whose lives run parallel. They're both dancers, and one of them shows great potential in ballet. She's a beautiful classical dancer. She's trained by a Russian, and she's headed for something impressive. And then the other girl is Lucille Ball, who it's an unusual role for her. It still has like her
Kind of
her
comic.
comedy
Yeah.
persona sort of lightly introduced there, but really she's only quite young when she did this, so that's yet to be developed, but you can see the seeds of it. Anyway, they're looking for work, and Lucille Ball gets hired on nice money, and she's more brassy, and she's more likely to be able to negotiate a higher wage. But what she's actually doing is it's sort of a burlesque show. So she comes on and sings a saucy song, and she removes various items of clothing. But this being in 1940, you don't see anything. It's just done sort of, suggestively. And then the idea is she's wildly popular. Lots of audiences, lots of male audiences in the theatre. And shocking, I know. And then her former friend, the lovely classical ballerina, is played by Maureen O'Hara. And in this, she is playing somebody who comes on after Lucille Ball onto the stage, does classical ballet, and that's it. And as a result of the audience now seeing this delightful thing of classical ballet, they all start booing her because that's not what they want. And they start calling out for Lucille Ball to get back on the stage again, which of course she does. Maureen O'Hara has to interrupt her show and go off humiliated. And then Lucille Ball comes in. But what Maureen O'Hara hasn't been told by anybody, not Lucille Ball, her alleged friend, and not the men putting on the show, is that it's a deliberate thing. It's something that they do deliberately in order to give the audience more of what they want, but ensure that they feel in control about getting it back on stage themselves.
Right.
So it's a really nice film. There's some early feminism in here. There is discussion, and bearing in mind we've got a female director, and you get the odd line that speaks to the female performer. And the female who has to working women at the time. I keep saying the word female, sorry. I'll start that again. You get the odd line that talks about the position of working women at that time. And presumably Dorothy Arzner, had a part in allowing that to go ahead. At one point it says, "That's right, condemn a girl because she has to earn a living. And you're staring at the girl the way your wives won't let you." And they see through you just like we do. And there's some moments throughout the film where you realize you've had a woman's hand sort of on the control there. So that's really nice to see in a film as early as 1940. She's just the character of Judy Maureen O'Hara is just used as a stooge, and she's advertised as a stooge in the papers, and it's like I say, it's a deliberate ploy to make Lucille Ball's character of Tiger Lily more desirable. But she's not getting paid as much, and she's being humiliated on a nightly basis. So into this, it's still 1940. There's not many mention of alternative lifestyles or different ways of setting up a domestic situation. So you have to get Ralph Bellamy coming in. And if you remember Trading Places, he was in that as one of the older gentlemen who had the wager with Don Amici. That resulted in Eddie Murphy's hilarious escapades. And he's here as a young man, but a wealthy businessman who has a hand in, like a business hand in running dance theatre and dance organisations. So he is able to, pick her out of obscurity type thing. So he turns into the traditional hero. However, it's nice to see that there is still, women having a say in their own future, in their own destiny. It's not an easy fit, obviously, because the women are still at the mercy of the paying men and the producers who hire them. And that's a debate that still continues today with the Me Too movement and all of that stuff. It's all tied in. But it's a really nice film. It's a early insight into women having more say in what they want to do with their lives and listening to their voices and their opinions. So it's a good watch.
You mentioned that there is a slight sort of feeling that maybe Ralph Bellamy's character is being introduced to sort of divert the audience's suspicions away from there being a different relationship, shall we say, in this film.
I know what you mean, but I
Yeah.
didn't feel like that was evident. I felt like, I mean, he is wheeled in as the classic hero.
Mm.
He very much that character sweeping in and rescuing. But up until that point, you've got women working for themselves, negotiating their own wages, and it isn't an ideal setup for one of them. And it does, so they've reached a point, and that she can only reach a point before she needs rescuing. But Lucille Ball's going to be fine.
Yeah, fair enough. I was just going to mention that Arsena herself was gay and was probably about as out as you could have been back then. So
Oh, wonderful.
there may be a level, in the same way that James Whale's horror movies have a certain level of queer coding in, that may have been deliberate.
There is a tiny part of it that's like that. You get them living
Yeah.
together and you get them sort of changing in the same room, but that's pretty standard when you do theatre work.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to mention is the character of Madame Basilova,
Yes.
who is played by, and I've backed myself into this corner, let me see if I can pronounce this, Maria Uspenskaya, who
Yeah.
was a real-life acting coach in the Golden Age Hollywood era. But I also knew her because she's in the old Lon Chaney film, The Wolf Man, and
She's not the hunchback nurse, is she?
I can't. No, she's like the gypsy woman.
Ah, okay.
She's the one who has all of that dialogue about how a werewolf, can't cross water and only comes out by the light of the moon and can only be killed with a silver bullet. All of which is total bollocks. That doesn't exist in any folklore before that 1940 movie, but everyone thinks that's authentic European werewolf folklore now, which just tickles me so much.
What does kill a werewolf?
I don't know. I wonder if it's one of those things like, when you see the list of things that kill a vampire, and it's like, oh, stab them in the heart or cut off their head. And you think, yeah, that's going to kill more than just vampires.
Yeah, most people, that's quite effective.
Yes.
No, I didn't know that. She's got an interesting role in the film because she's like a chaperone for the girls at the dance school, and there's a number of women that she oversees. But then I think it's the Depression or something means that the dance school is going to fold, and she was like a protector for Maureen O'Hara. Bless you. And it's she goes with her to the city for this dance audition, and then she gets run over, and it's just an extraordinary moment. You're thinking, what? How unusual to include that. There's no sort of, it's out of the blue. It's not followed up. It's just a random incident. It does highlight Maureen O'Hara's isolation, and there's nobody maternal on her side with her best wishes in mind, and she does sort of, that sets her up to be at the mercy of salacious producers or whatever. But it's just such an unusual moment. I've not seen anything. It's so grave.
Yeah, that sounds like a good film, and it's nice to see the Criterion Collection making room for some more female directors, because we did take a look through their catalogue in the UK, at least, for this once, didn't we? And it was not a great result.
I know it feels a bit uneven at times, but I mean, I think this film is more coherent than this. I'm trying to think of that other film that I watched recently, and it's partly like somebody having gags and like knockabout farce, and it contrasts something really quite serious, and I can't remember what it is now.
Was that A Foreign Affair?
Yes, that's it.
Billy Wilder,
Yes.
which I sort of really like for that reason, although I do think part of why I like it is I'm thinking, God, if this was any other creative team, this would be the most tasteless thing in the world.
Yeah, it sits uneasy as a modern audience, yeah.
So coming up next week, I mean, we don't know. How could we know? Nobody knows what's coming out. It was going to be Tenet, and then, well, yes, that happened. But when we do have any idea what we're doing next week, we will let you know through social media. In the meantime, thanks for listening. That's been Cinema Eclectica. I've been Graham.
And I've been Tim.
See you next week.